The worst part about a death in deep space isn't the memorial service. It's the paperwork. I stood in my office on Deck 2, reviewing Ensign Miller's personnel file for the third time, while the Magellan hummed its post-jump song around me. That particular frequency of recovered equilibrium after we'd punched through dimensions to arrive 47 light-years from where we'd started. Executive Officer's log, supplemental, another successful jump. All departments reporting nominal status, 1 casualty to synaptic drift syndrome. The same report I'd filed 6 times in 3 years, different only in the name. Miller, Thomas, engineering technician, 3rd class, 28 years old, unmarried. No next of kin listed except a foster sister back on Mars Colony 7, one of those industrial hellholes where they process ore and political dissidents with equal efficiency. I made a note to ensure she received his personal effects and the survivor's pension. The fleet took care of its own, even in death. Especially in death. Captain Cole expected the memorial at 1400 hours, which gave me 90 minutes to finish the administrative requirements and make my rounds through the ship. I pulled up Miller's medical history, cross-referencing it with the standard SDS casualty report Dr. Fuller had submitted. Synaptic drift syndrome, the price some people paid for faster-than-light travel. 1 in 500, the statistics said. The jump process created a dimensional shear effect that most brains could handle, but for an unlucky few, their neural pathways simply unraveled like a sweater with a pulled thread. No prevention or cure, just another cost of reaching for the stars. I was about to sign off on the report when something made me pause. A timestamp in Miller's file. I pulled up his pre-jump medical clearance, standard procedure. Everyone gets a neural scan before we punch through. There it was, 17:32 hours yesterday. Full neurological screening. Results, optimal. Brain pattern stability, 98.6%. Signed by Dr. Fuller himself. 6 hours later, Miller was dead from a syndrome that supposedly struck without warning. I checked the medical literature on my terminal, though I knew what it would say. I'd read it enough times, trying to understand why we kept losing people. Minimum neural stability for safe jump threshold, 70%. Typical SDS victims showed patterns in the 60 to 65 range in their last screening, if they were lucky enough to have warning signs at all. Miller's reading was nearly perfect. The file stared back at me from the screen. Maybe Fuller had made an error. Maybe the scanner had malfunctioned. But Fuller didn't make errors. That's why he was chief medical officer on the fleet's newest long-range exploration vessel. And our equipment was state-of-the-art, with triple redundancy on all critical systems. I closed the file and stood, straightening my uniform. The captain needed to know about this discrepancy. Arthur Cole had taught me that command meant attention to detail. The small things, Ben, he'd told me when I first came aboard as his XO. The small things are what kill ships. The walk to his ready room took me through the command deck's main corridor. Junior officers snapped to attention as I passed, and I nodded acknowledgement without really seeing them. My mind kept circling back to that timestamp. 6 hours. From perfect neural stability to complete synaptic collapse in 6 hours. I pressed the chime outside Cole's door and waited for his distinctive enter. That voice that had become my North Star over the past 3 years. Arthur Cole wasn't just my commanding officer. He was everything my father hadn't been. Decisive where Dad had been weak. Present where Dad had drifted. A man who understood that actions mattered more than intentions. The ready room always smelled of real coffee. Cole's one indulgence, shipped at ridiculous expense from Earth, and old books. He kept a shelf of them, actual paper, because he said command was about understanding history. He sat behind his desk, reviewing fuel consumption reports, and looked up with those steady grey eyes that had seen the worst the galaxy could offer, and remained unbroken. Ben, how are the memorial preparations? On schedule, sir. But I found a discrepancy in Miller's file that I thought you should know about. His expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted, like the pressure adjustment before an airlock cycles. I handed him my datapad with Miller's medical records displayed. His pre-jump neural scan showed 98.6% stability, 6 hours before he died from SDS. Cole studied the screen for a long moment. Then he set the datapad down on his desk, face down, and leaned back in his chair. When he spoke, his voice carried that particular weight it got when he was about to teach me something important. Ben, how many jumps have you logged now? 43, sir. And in those 43 jumps, how many times has the universe made perfect sense? It wasn't the response I'd expected. Sir? SDS is still largely a mystery. We know it happens, we know the approximate rate, but the mechanics... He spread his hands. The human brain is complex. The interaction between consciousness and dimensional shear even more so. Sometimes people who should survive don't. Sometimes the readings are wrong. But Fuller signed off on this scan himself. And Fuller has been under considerable stress. 3 losses in 6 months. It weighs on a medical officer. Cole stood, came around the desk and put a hand on my shoulder. The gesture was paternal, comforting. I appreciate your diligence, Ben. It's what makes you an excellent XO. But sometimes, for the good of the crew, we need to accept that space takes its toll and move forward. The good of the crew. Of course. 450 souls on this ship, all looking to us for stability, for certainty. If they started questioning every SDS death, wondering if the medical scans were accurate, if they were safe... You're right, sir. I'll make a note about potential scanner calibration issues for the next maintenance cycle. Good man. His hand squeezed my shoulder once before releasing. The memorial? 1400 hours as scheduled. I'll say a few words. Miller was a good technician. Quiet but dedicated. Cole returned to his desk, the conversation clearly over. Dismissed. I turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Sir? Did you know Miller well? Cole looked up from his reports. Well enough, Ben. He did his duty. That's all any of us can ask for. I left the ready room and walked back to my office, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The smart thing would be to drop it. File the report, hold the memorial, move on. Captain Cole had given me an order, wrapped in a suggestion, delivered with paternal wisdom. Let it lie. For the good of the crew. I sat at my desk and pulled up Miller's file again. That 98.6% stability score stared back at me. Dr. Fuller's digital signature beneath it, time-stamped and verified. 6 hours before a man's brain unraveled from a syndrome that had never, in all the medical literature, struck someone with readings that high. I thought about my father then, unexpectedly. The way he'd sit in his study when the bills came due, when Mum needed him to fight the insurance company, when the school called about my bloody nose from another fight. The way he'd sigh and retreat into his books, choosing the path of least resistance every single time. Sometimes, son, he'd told me once, the wise man knows when not to fight. I joined the fleet to get away from that philosophy, to find a place where right and wrong were clear, where duty meant something, where good men took stands. Captain Cole had shown me that place existed. He taught me that integrity wasn't just about following rules. It was about knowing when to ask the hard questions. So why was he telling me not to ask this one? I closed Miller's file and opened a new search query. I pulled up the SDS casualty reports for the Magellan's previous jumps. 6 deaths in 3 years. I'd attended every memorial, signed every form, but I'd never looked at them as a pattern before. I pulled their pre-jump medical clearances. Reeves, 94% neural stability. Bailey, 96.2%. Janssen, 97.1%. I checked the fleet medical database, accessed the compiled SDS statistics from the past decade. Average neural stability in confirmed SDS casualties, 62%. Highest recorded pre-jump stability in an SDS death, 78%. That was on the Cassiopeia 4 years ago, and it had triggered a full medical review board. Every single one of our SDS deaths had readings 20 points higher than the highest recorded elsewhere in the fleet. Either the Magellan was experiencing a completely unprecedented medical phenomenon, or Dr. Fuller had been lying. I stared at the data for another 10 minutes, running probability calculations in my head. The odds of 6 consecutive SDS casualties, all having neural stability above 90%, were roughly the same as winning the lottery while being struck by lightning during a solar eclipse. But what was the alternative? That our chief medical officer had falsified medical records? That Captain Cole, the man who taught me everything about duty and honor, was complicit in what? There was no logical endpoint to that thought. Murder? That was insane. We were the fleet. We were the good guys. I locked my terminal and stood. The memorial was in 40 minutes and I had duties to perform. Whatever was happening here, scanner malfunction, filing errors, some unknown variable in long-duration jumps, it could wait until after we'd paid our respects to Miller. The observation deck had been configured for the ceremony. Chairs in neat rows, the fleet banner hung against the viewport with the stars as backdrop. I supervised the arrangements, checking that everything met protocol. Form mattered at times like these. Structure. It reminded us who we were when death tried to make us feel small. The crew filed in quietly. I stood at the front, watching them take their seats. Engineers mostly. Miller's department. They looked tired, worn down by another loss. Master Chief Gibbs sat in the back row, his weathered face unreadable as always. He'd been in the fleet longer than anyone else on board, had probably attended more of these memorials than he could count. Dr. Fuller arrived 5 minutes before start time, and I found myself studying him. His hands shook slightly as he took his seat. Stress, Cole had said. 3 losses in 6 months. Captain Cole entered exactly at 1400 hours. The crew stood as one, and he motioned for them to sit. He took his position at the podium, and for a moment, I saw him as the crew must see him. Steady, paternal, unshakable. The kind of commander you'd follow into hell because you knew he'd lead you back out. "We gather today to honor Ensign Thomas Miller," Cole began, his voice carrying that perfect balance of authority and warmth. He was 28 years old, a skilled technician, a quiet presence who did his duty without complaint or recognition. The kind of person who makes a ship run, even if they never make the headlines. I watched the faces in the crowd. Some nodded along, others stared at their hands. A young technician in the 3rd row was crying silently. Had she known Miller well? I realized I couldn't answer that. As XO, I knew every crew member's service record, their efficiency ratings, their disciplinary history, if any. But I didn't know who Miller ate lunch with, what he did during rec hours, who would miss him beyond a professional capacity. "Space exploration demands sacrifice," Cole continued. "We all knew this when we signed on. The Void doesn't care about our dreams or ambitions. It takes its toll, seemingly at random. Synaptic drift syndrome remains one of the cruelest of those tolls. Striking without warning, without mercy, without reason we can fully understand. Ensign Miller's name will be added to the wall of remembrance. His service will not be forgotten. His sacrifice enables humanity's reach for the stars. We honor him by continuing the mission, by pushing forward, by refusing to let loss define us." The ceremony concluded with the traditional moment of silence. I stood at attention, but my mind wouldn't quiet. Those numbers kept spinning through my thoughts. As the crew filed out, I caught Dr. Fuller near the door. "Doctor, a word?" He froze, then turned slowly. Up close, I could see the broken capillaries in his eyes, the slight puffiness that suggested he'd been drinking. "Commander Carter, what can I do for you?" I was reviewing Miller's file. His pre-jump neural scan was within normal parameters. The response came too quick, too practiced. I file all reports according to protocol. I'm not questioning your reports, I'm just trying to understand. 98% stability seems high for an SDS casualty. Fuller's mouth hardened, a controlled seal. The interaction between consciousness and dimensional shear is not fully understood. Anomalies occur. 6 anomalies? All on our ship? Commander. Fuller's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Some questions are above both our pay grades. If you'll excuse me, I have duties in the med bay. He walked away, his pace just short of a run. I watched him go, noting the rigid set of his shoulders, the way his hands clenched at his sides. This wasn't the behavior of a stressed doctor. This was fear. Sir? I turned to find a young man in engineering colours standing behind me. Sam Jones, according to his name tape. Technician, second class. His eyes were red-rimmed, and he kept shifting his weight from foot to foot. Can I help you, Jones? I wanted to. Miller was my friend. We came aboard together. Went through orientation together. I'm sorry for your loss. The thing is... Jones glanced around, confirming we were alone. Tom wasn't sick. He was fine yesterday. We were playing cards until 2200 hours. He was laughing, making jokes about the terrible coffee in the mess. He was going to file a grievance about the overtime scheduling. Said the engineers were being worked too hard, that it wasn't safe. A grievance. Official complaints went through the XO's office, through me. But I'd never seen any paperwork from Miller. Did he file this grievance? He said he was going to, after the jump. Said he wanted to document everything properly first. Sir, I know SDS strikes without warning, but Tom, he was sharp, focused. He won 3 hands of poker off me, and I'm not that bad a player. Does someone with a brain about to unravel win at cards 6 hours before they die? The logical part of my brain said yes, possibly. SDS was sudden onset by definition. But the pattern I'd found, Fuller's fear, and now this, a planned grievance that would never be filed because the person planning it was dead. Jones, did Miller ever express any concerns about safety, about the jumps themselves? Jones shook his head. No, sir, just the overtime. He said tired engineers make mistakes, and mistakes in space kill people. His voice cracked on the last word. Guess he was right. Just not the way he thought. I put a hand on Jones's shoulder, felt him trembling slightly. Thank you for telling me this. If you remember anything else about Miller's concerns, my door is always open. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Jones straightened, trying to pull himself together. He was from Mars Colony 7, you know. Like me. We used to joke that we'd made it out, that we were seeing the stars instead of processing ore. He said the Federation saved his life, getting him off that rock. Mars Colony 7. I'd seen that in Miller's file, noted it as just another detail, but Jones said it like it meant something more. What's it like there? Mars 7. Jones's expression darkened. It's where the Federation sends the people it wants to forget about. Dissidents, troublemakers, people who ask the wrong questions. They work the minds until they can't anymore. Tom's parents were political reformists. Died when he was 15. Mine accident, officially. Tom got out through the technical apprentice program. Kept his head down, never talked politics, just wanted to work and see the stars. He used to say the fleet gave him a second chance. A political dissident's son who never talked politics, but was about to file a grievance. Who died from a syndrome that had never struck someone with his neural readings. Whose death prevented any questions about working conditions from being officially raised. Thank you, Jones, I said again, meaning it this time. Take care of yourself. He nodded and left, and I stood alone in the empty observation deck. Outside the viewport, stars wheeled slowly as the Magellan maintained its rotation. Somewhere among those points of light was Earth, where the Fleet Admiralty made the decisions that governed our lives. Somewhere else was Mars Colony 7, where dissidents mined ore until accidents claimed them. And here, between the stars, People with perfect neural scans died from a syndrome that shouldn't have touched them. The smart thing would be to stop here, to file my reports, do my duty, trust in the chain of command, to be the perfect XO that Captain Cole was grooming me to become. I walked back to my office and unlocked my terminal. This time I accessed the duty rosters for the past 2 years, cross-referencing them with our SDS casualties, looking for patterns beyond the medical. Ensign Reeves filed a complaint about sexual harassment 2 days before her death. Petty Officer Bailey, noted in his supervisor's log as difficult and asking too many questions about classified cargo. Specialist Janssen, transferred from another ship after reporting his previous captain for violating safety protocols. Every single one of them had been a problem in some way. Every single one had rocked the boat, asked questions, challenged authority, and every single one had died from a syndrome that shouldn't have killed them. Their perfect neural scans signed off by Dr. Fuller, their deaths accepted by Captain Cole. This wasn't incompetence or coincidence. This was something deliberate, something monstrous, and Captain Arthur Cole, my mentor, my moral North Star, the man who'd taught me about duty and honor, he knew. He had to know. I locked my terminal and stood up, then sat back down immediately. My legs weren't quite steady. I needed to think, but thinking meant acknowledging what I'd just discovered, and acknowledging it meant what? That Captain Cole was a murderer? That the fleet's newest exploration vessel was systematically killing its own crew? That everything I'd built my career on, my identity on, was a lie? No. There had to be another explanation. Maybe Cole didn't know. Maybe Fuller was acting alone, selecting certain crew members for what? Why would a doctor kill people and make it look like SDS? What possible motive could justify that? Unless Fuller wasn't acting alone. Unless this went higher than just the medical bay. I pulled up the ship's command structure on my terminal. Captain Cole at the top, myself as XO just below. Department heads reporting to me, Fuller in medical, Gibbs in engineering, Lieutenant Commander Harding in security, Commander Griffin in navigation. Any conspiracy would need at least medical involvement to fake the deaths, and likely security to prevent investigation. But how many people could keep a secret like this? How many would need to? The captain, the doctor, and maybe 1 or 2 others. That's all it would take. Everyone else would just follow orders, file reports, attend memorials, like I'd been doing for 3 years. My door chimed. I cleared my screen before calling out, "Enter!" Master Chief Gibbs stepped inside, and I knew immediately this wasn't a routine visit. He never came to officer country unless specifically summoned. He stood there in his grease-stained coveralls, looking at me with those weathered eyes that had seen decades of fleet service. "Master Chief, what can I do for you?" "Permission to speak freely, sir?" That was never a good sign. "Granted." Gibbs closed the door behind him and engaged the privacy lock. The room was now soundproofed. "You've been looking into Miller's death." I kept my expression neutral, a skill Cole had taught me. "I review all casualty reports. It's part of my duties." "Cut the shit, Commander." Gibbs moved closer. "I've been in this fleet for 30 years. I know when an officer starts asking the wrong questions. And you've got that look." "What look?" "The same one Lieutenant Morrison had on the Perseverance 7 years ago. The same one Ensign Chu had on the Endeavour 4 years back." He pulled out a small flask from his pocket, took a sip, then offered it to me. They both died from SDS within a week of getting that look. I didn't take the flask. "Are you suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you that space is dangerous and some dangers don't come from outside the hull." He took another sip. "Miller was a good kid, worked hard, didn't complain much, but he talked to me last week about filing that grievance. I told him to keep his head down, do his time, make it to pension. He didn't listen." "You knew he was going to file a complaint?" I know lots of things, Commander. I know that the recycling systems in Section 12 have been running above spec for 6 months. I know that Lieutenant Harding has been skimming from the contraband locker. And I know that every single person who's died from SDS on this ship had one thing in common. They made themselves inconvenient. There it was, independent confirmation of what I'd discovered. Gibbs had seen the pattern too, had probably seen it long before I had. Why haven't you said anything? Gibbs laughed, but there was no humor in it. To who? You. You've been Cole's golden boy since day one, the captain. He signs my evaluations. The Fleet Investigative Board. They're 40 light years away, and messages have a funny way of getting lost in space. So you just let it happen? I keep my people alive when I can. I told Miller to keep his head down. I've told a dozen others the same thing. Most listen. The ones who don't. He shrugged. I'm not a hero, Commander. I'm an old man who wants to make it to retirement without ending up on the wrong side of an airlock. What happened on the Perseverance and the Endeavour? I asked. Gibbs was quiet for a long moment. Same thing that happens on every long-range ship, Commander. People die from SDS, always have ever since we figured out how to jump. The only difference is that some ships are unluckier than others. Some ships lose the right people at the right time. The right people? The ones who ask questions. The ones who don't follow orders. The ones who think their conscience matters more than the mission. He looked at me directly. The ones who get that look you've got right now. Are you threatening me? I'm trying to save your life, you stupid bastard. The vehemence in his voice surprised me. You're a good XO. You run a tight ship. You treat the enlisted fair, and you don't play favorites. But you're also Cole's protege, which means you're either in on it or you're naive as hell. I was hoping for the former, but looking at you now, I didn't know. No, you didn't, and now you do. So the question is, what are you going to do about it? I wanted to say I'd stop it, that I'd expose the truth, bring justice for Miller and the others. But Gibbs was right. I had no proof, and even if I did, who would I tell? We were between jumps, weeks from any communication relay. The captain had absolute authority out here. If Cole decided I was a threat... 98.6%, I said quietly. Miller's neural stability. That's not just unlikely for an SDS death. It's impossible. Unless it wasn't SDS that killed him. Then what? Gibbs finished his flask and pocketed it. You ever wonder why FTL jumps require such precise calculations? Why the navigation team locks themselves in for 12 hours before every jump, running numbers that the computer could do in seconds? It's standard protocol, human oversight of critical systems. Is it? Or is there something else happening during those 12 hours? Something that requires human decision-making because a computer would never make the choice? What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that every jump requires a specific amount of energy. Not from the reactor. We've got power to spare. A different kind of energy. The kind you can't measure with conventional instruments. He was losing me. Master Chief, if you know something concrete, I know that I run diagnostics on the FTL drive after every jump. I know that there's an energy signature that appears during the transition that doesn't match any of our theoretical models. And I know that signature correlates exactly with the moment our SDS casualties flatline. You're saying the jump itself kills them? I'm saying the jump requires something we don't talk about, something the brass doesn't want us to understand, and maybe that something has to come from somewhere, or someone. The implication was insane, that the FTL drive somehow fed on human consciousness, that we were deliberately sacrificing crew members to make our jumps possible. It was the kind of conspiracy theory that got people sectioned for psychological evaluation. But it would explain everything. The selection of victims, troublemakers who wouldn't be missed. The neural readings because they weren't dying from SDS at all. Cole's insistence that I drop the investigation. Fuller's terror. That's impossible, I said, but even I could hear the uncertainty in my voice. Is it? You've got access to systems I don't, Commander. Pull up the energy distribution logs for our last 6 jumps. Look at the timestamp when the drive initializes. Cross-reference it with the medical bay's power consumption. See what you find. He moved towards the door, then paused. And Commander, whatever you decide to do, be smart about it. Cole's a good captain, but he's a practical man. He'll do what he thinks is necessary for the mission, even if that means losing an XO to an unfortunate case of SDS. You're saying he'd kill me? I'm saying that in the 3 years you've been aboard, has Cole ever made a decision that wasn't for the greater good? Has he ever put one person's life above the mission? I thought about all the times Cole had made the hard choices, leaving a damaged shuttle behind to make a jump window, rationing medical supplies when we were months from resupply, always logical, always focused on the greater good. No, I admitted. Then don't give him a reason to make that calculation about you. Gibbs unlocked the door. He left, and I sat in the silence of my office, staring at my dark terminal screen. I could leave it here. Pretend this conversation never happened, file my reports, do my duty, make it to my own command someday, follow the path Cole had laid out for me. Or I could pull up those energy distribution logs and find out if the unthinkable was actually true. My father would have chosen safety, would have rationalized it as wisdom, as knowing which battles to fight. He would have gone back to his books and his quiet life and told himself he was being smart. I activated my terminal and pulled up the energy distribution logs for our last jump, the one that killed Miller. Jump initiation. 05:32 hours and 17 seconds. I cross-referenced with the medical logs. Miller's time of death, 05:32 hours and 17 seconds, exact match. I checked the previous jump. Ensign Reeves. Same correlation down to the second. Every single one, 6 deaths, 6 perfect correlations. The moment the FTL drive reached full initialization, someone died in the medical bay. That wasn't coincidence. That wasn't syndrome. That was execution. I copied the data to a secure partition, encrypting it with my personal key. Whatever happened next, I needed evidence. Proof that would survive, even if I didn't. Because Master Chief Gibbs was right about one thing. Captain Cole was a practical man who always chose the greater good. And I was about to become a problem that might require a practical solution. I thought about engineering. The FTL drive ran on fusion power, same as everything else on the ship. We had enough energy to jump a dozen times over. So why would human death be necessary? What possible mechanism could require... Unless Gibbs was right. Unless there was something about the jump process itself that we didn't understand. Something that couldn't be measured in conventional terms. The fleet had been using FTL drives for 40 years. But the technology had been discovered, not invented. Found in the wreckage of an alien probe that had drifted into our solar system. We'd reverse-engineered it, copied it, improved the efficiency. But did we really understand how it worked? I pulled up my Academy textbooks from the ship's library, searching for anything about the drive's development. Most of it was classified above my level, but there were references to anomalous energy requirements and non-standard field interactions that scientists had never fully explained. One paper mentioned consciousness-reactive particles before abruptly shifting topics. My door chimed. I encrypted my screen before calling Enter. Dr. Fuller stood in the doorway, and I knew immediately that something had changed. His usual nervous energy was gone, replaced by a hollow exhaustion. He looked like a man who'd given up fighting. Commander, may I come in? Of course, Doctor. He entered and engaged the privacy lock without asking. Then he pulled out a silver flask. Everyone seemed to have one on this ship. And took a long drink before sitting in the chair across from my desk. You've been investigating, he said. I've been reviewing records, yes. Don't. He took another drink. Please. For your own sake, just don't. Doctor, if there's something wrong with our medical screening procedures... Stop. He laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. Do you think I'm an idiot, Commander? Do you think I don't know what those neural readings mean? 98.6%, I wrote that number. I signed that report. I stood in that memorial and listened to Cole talk about sacrifice while knowing exactly what kind of sacrifice it really was. The admission hit me like decompression. He knew. He'd always known. You're saying Miller was murdered? I'm saying Miller was selected. Fuller's hands shook as he raised the flask again. Just like Reeves, just like Bailey, just like all the others. Selected for what? To pay the price. He met my eyes, and I saw a man drowning in his own guilt. Every jump requires payment. One life for safe passage. That's the deal. What deal? With who? With the things that live between spaces. The entities that exist in the dimension we pass through during a jump. Fuller pulled out a small data pad, his personal unit, not ship issue. This is going to sound insane. Try me. He activated the pad, showing me a scan I didn't recognize. It looked almost like a neural map, but twisted. This is what happens to consciousness during an FTL jump, he said. For most of us, we're shielded. Protected by the ship's hull, by the drive's field generators, by things we don't fully understand. But we're not really here during the transition. We exist somewhere else for that fraction of a second. Somewhere inhabited. Inhabited by what? We don't know. The xenobiologists have theories, energy beings, consciousness without form, predators that evolved in higher dimensions. What we do know is that they're hungry, and they're powerful enough to destroy a ship in transit if they're not fed. I wanted to laugh, to dismiss this as the ravings of a drunk, but the data on my screen showed the perfect correlation between jumps and deaths, and Fuller's eyes held the terrible weight of truth. How long have you known? Since my first tour. 5 years ago, on the Constellation. The CMO there brought me into it, just like I'm telling you now. He said it was the burden of medical officers on long-range ships. We select who pays the price. We make it look natural. We carry the weight so everyone else can sleep at night. And you just accepted that. What was the alternative? Fuller's voice cracked. Refuse and get selected myself? Tell the crew and cause a panic that would end human expansion into space? You think the fleet would let that happen? You think they'd let one doctor's conscience destroy everything we've built? So you became a murderer instead? Yes. The word came out flat, empty. I became a murderer. 27 times on this ship. I've injected 27 people with a paralytic compound that keeps them conscious but immobile. I've wheeled them into the neural diagnostics chamber. I've connected them to the interface that feeds their consciousness to those things during the jump. I've watched their bodies flatline while their minds were consumed. And then I've written reports about synaptic drift syndrome and attended their memorials. The flask slipped from his fingers, clattering on the floor. Neither of us moved to pick it up. Why are you telling me this? Because I can't do it anymore. And because Cole is going to want you to take over selections. What? That's how it works. The captain and the XO decide who goes. The CMO implements it. It's a command decision, compartmentalized to senior staff. Cole's been protecting you, letting you keep your innocence. But now that you're asking questions, he'll have to bring you in or select me. He likes you, Commander. Respects you. He wants you to understand, to carry on the tradition. But if you refuse... Fuller retrieved his flask, found it empty, and set it aside. The last XO refused. Commander Harrison, you were told he transferred to a desk job, weren't you? I remembered the rushed farewell, the sudden departure. He died on a jump. He threatened to expose everything. Cole tried to reason with him, to explain the necessity. Harrison wouldn't listen, so he became payment. Fuller stood, swaying slightly. I'm telling you this because you're a good man, and good men deserve the truth before they're forced to choose. Cole will call for you soon. He'll explain it all very rationally, very calmly. He'll make it sound like duty, like sacrifice, like the greater good. It's murder. Yes, but it's murder that keeps 450 people alive. It's murder that allows humanity to reach the stars. It's murder that the entire fleet is built on. He moved toward the door, then stopped. Did you know Miller had a sister? On Mars 7. She'll get his pension, his death benefits. Enough money to buy her way off that rock, start a real life. He's worth more to her dead than he ever could have been alive. That doesn't make it right. No, it doesn't. Fuller disengaged the privacy lock. When Cole calls for you, remember something. He genuinely believes he's doing the right thing. He's not a monster. He's just a man who's made the same calculations so many times that he's forgotten it was ever a choice. He left, and I sat in the silence of my office processing what I'd just learned. The fleet was built on human sacrifice. Every long-range ship, every deep space mission, every jump into the unknown was paid for in blood and consciousness. I thought about the Academy, about the oath I'd taken, to protect humanity, to serve the fleet, to follow orders and trust in the chain of command. But they'd left out the most important part, to feed our own people to interdimensional predators so we could play at being explorers. My terminal chimed. A message from Captain Cole. Please report to my ready room at your earliest convenience. There it was. The moment Gibbs had warned me about, that Fuller had prepared me for. The moment when I would be invited to become complicit or become a victim. I saved all my data to multiple encrypted partitions, then created a dead man switch that would transmit everything if I didn't check in every 12 hours. It wasn't much of an insurance policy. We were too far from any relay stations for the message to get through, but it was something. Then I straightened my uniform, checked my sidearm, and headed for the captain's ready room. Time to learn what kind of man I really was. The walk to Captain Cole's ready room had never felt longer. I passed crew members going about their duties, a pair of technicians arguing about plasma flow rates, an ensign polishing a deck plate that already gleamed, a couple sharing a quiet laugh outside the mess. None of them knew they were livestock. None of them knew that their lives hung on staying useful, staying quiet, staying convenient. Or maybe some did know on some level. Maybe that's why Gibbs kept his flask, why Fuller drank himself to sleep, why the senior staff had that particular weight in their eyes that I'd always attributed to the burden of command. I stopped outside Cole's door and took a breath. My sidearm felt heavier than usual, though I knew I'd never use it. Not against him. Even now, even knowing what I knew, part of me hoped there was an explanation that would make this all make sense. That would let me continue believing in the man who'd shaped me into who I was. I pressed the chime. Enter. The ready room was dimmer than usual, only the desk lamp providing light. Cole stood at the viewport, hands clasped behind his back, watching the stars wheel slowly past. He didn't turn when I entered. Ben, thank you for coming. Captain, would you like coffee? I had a fresh pot sent up from stores, the real stuff. No, thank you, sir. He nodded, still facing the stars. Dr. Fuller visited you. Of course he knew. Cole always knew everything that happened on his ship. He did. And Master Chief Gibbs before that. Good men, both of them. Gibbs especially. 30 years of service, never a single disciplinary action. The kind of backbone the fleet is built on. He finally turned to face me, and I was struck by how tired he looked. They've told you things, shown you data, made you question. They've told me the truth. Have they? Cole moved to his desk, pulled out a bottle of whiskey, not fleet issue, something from Earth with a label in Gaelic, and poured 2 glasses despite my refusal of coffee. They've told you their interpretation of the truth, but truth, Ben, is more complex than data points and correlations. He pushed 1 glass toward me and lifted his own. Do you know what happened on the Odyssey? It's classified above my level. Everything important is. He took a sip, savored it. The Odyssey was one of our first long-range exploration vessels. 500 souls aboard, heading for the Kepler systems. I was a lieutenant then, assistant navigation officer. Young, idealistic, absolutely certain that humanity's destiny was among the stars. He moved to the bookshelf, running his fingers along the spines of ancient texts. The third jump went wrong, not mechanically. The drive worked perfectly. But something was waiting for us in that space between spaces. The entities Dr. Fuller mentioned. They attacked the ship during transit. Attacked how? They invaded our minds, fed on our consciousness. People collapsed where they stood, their neural patterns unraveling like... He paused, took another drink. Like fabric in acid. In 30 seconds, we lost 130 people. The screaming, Ben, you can't imagine. Those who weren't taken immediately could feel them, these hungry things, pulling at the edges of their minds. I found myself reaching for the glass he'd poured, needing something to anchor me. The captain ordered an emergency drop from FTL, but the entities followed us through. They were in the ship, in our heads. People started turning on each other, convinced their crewmates were infected, possessed. It was chaos, madness. And in the middle of it all, the ship's science officer made a discovery. Cole returned to his desk, sat down heavily. The entities could be bargained with. They didn't want to destroy us. We were food, yes, but sustainable food. They wanted a trade, safe passage in exchange for payment. One consciousness freely given for each jump. Freely given. That's the crucial part. It can't be taken by force. The person has to be alive, aware, unresisting at the moment of transfer. The paralytic compound Fuller uses. It ensures the payment is accepted. The victim can't fight back, can't resist. They simply go. That's murder. Yes, he said it simply, without excuse or qualification. It is murder, but the alternative was the loss of the entire ship. 500 lives, including mine. The captain made the choice. He called for volunteers. And? No one volunteered. Would you? To have your consciousness torn apart and devoured while your body died slowly in the medical bay? Cole shook his head. So the captain made another choice. He selected someone. A maintenance worker who'd been caught stealing from ship stores. Had him sedated, connected to the interface we'd rigged, and made the payment. And it worked. The entities accepted the trade and allowed us safe passage. We made it home with 370 survivors and a terrible secret. He met my eyes. The fleet listened to our report. They could have ended the FTL program then, grounded every ship, confined humanity to one solar system. Instead, they made a calculation. 1 life per jump, perhaps 1,000 lives a year, in exchange for the stars, for colonies, for the survival of the species. So they institutionalized murder. They institutionalized sacrifice. Cole's voice hardened. Every advancement in human history has been paid for in blood, Ben. Every railroad, every mine, every war for resources. This is no different, except we've made it clean. Controlled, merciful even. Merciful. Miller was 28 years old. Miller was a dissident from Mars 7 who was planning to cause disruption on my ship. He was selected carefully. His death serves multiple purposes. It pays for our passage, removes a potential threat to crew cohesion, and provides his sister with enough money to escape that hellhole of a colony. You're talking about him like he was a resource. Because that's what we all are. Cole stood, began pacing. Every person on this ship is a resource. You, me, Fuller, Gibbs. We all serve the mission. Most do it by living, working, maintaining the ship. But some serve by dying. That's the brutal mathematics of deep space exploration. I won't be part of this. You already are. He stopped pacing, faced me directly. You've been my XO for 3 years. Every jump we've made, every system we've explored, every bit of data we've collected, all paid for with lives you now object to sacrificing. You've benefited from this system your entire career. I didn't know, because I protected you from knowing, because I wanted you to retain your idealism as long as possible. But you started asking questions, following threads, becoming a danger to yourself and the crew. He returned to his desk, pulled out a datapad. So now you have a choice. Join or carry the weight of ending humanity's expansion to the stars. He activated the pad, showing me star charts, colony worlds, population projections. 15 billion humans on Earth and Mars. Resources depleting. Wars brewing over water, air, living space. The colonies are our release valve, our future. Without FTL travel, we have maybe 50 years before civilization collapses. With it, we have infinity. Built on a foundation of murder. Built on sacrifice. Just like every civilization before us. He poured himself another drink. I'm not asking you to like it, Ben. I'm asking you to understand it. To accept that sometimes leadership means making impossible choices, that sometimes the greater good demands terrible prices. Like my predecessor, Commander Harrison, was his death for the greater good? Cole's expression didn't change. Harrison couldn't see past his own moral absolutism. He would have destroyed everything, the ship, the mission, the future, for the sake of his conscience. I offered him what I'm offering you. Understanding, purpose, the chance to serve humanity's survival. He chose differently. You killed him. I selected him. There's a difference. I didn't kill him because I wanted to, or because I hated him. I selected him because his continued existence threatened something larger than any individual life, including mine. Cole pulled out another datapad, this one sealed in a security case. This contains the selection protocols, how we choose, why we choose, the careful balance between necessity and cruelty. He pushed it across the desk toward me. Take it, read it, understand what we do and why, then decide. Will you help me carry this burden? Will you help humanity reach the stars knowing the cost, or will you follow Harrison's path? I stared at the datapad. Such a small thing to contain such monstrous knowledge. How long do I have to decide? Our next jump is in 72 hours. I'll need to know by then. He stood, moved back to the viewport. If you choose to join us, you'll help select the next payment. You'll learn to make the calculation, to weigh one life against many. You'll carry that weight for the rest of your career, but you'll also know that you helped humanity survive. And if I refuse? He was quiet for a long moment. Then you'll be transferred at our next port. Official records will show a commendation for excellent service and a promotion to a ground-side position. You'll never serve on a long-range vessel again, but you'll live. That's not what happened to Harrison. Harrison tried to transmit our conversation to Fleet Command. He attempted to sabotage the FTL drive. He gave me no choice. Cole turned to look at me one last time. You're not Harrison, Ben. You're smarter than that. You understand that some battles can't be won, only survived. He was wrong. I wasn't smarter than Harrison, but I was more patient. I picked up the datapad. I'll read it. Good, Ben. His voice softened. I know this is hard. I know it feels like betrayal. But I didn't make these rules, I just enforce them because someone has to. Someone has to stand between humanity and the dark, even if it means becoming darkness ourselves. I left without responding, carrying the datapad like a live grenade. 72 hours to decide whether to become a murderer or a victim. My father would have taken the transfer, called it wisdom, lived with the knowledge and the guilt until it hollowed him out from the inside. But I wasn't my father. I had 72 hours to find another option. 72 hours to figure out how to stop this without destroying humanity's future. I made it back to my quarters without encountering anyone, though I could feel eyes on me the entire way. Security cameras that I'd never paid attention to before seemed to track my movement. A maintenance worker in the corridor glanced up from his work just long enough to note my passing. Everyone was suspect now. Everyone could be part of it. My quarters were small but private, one of the privileges of being XO. I engaged the lock, activated the privacy screen, and sat at my desk with Cole's datapad. For a long moment, I just stared at it. Once I opened this, there would be no going back to ignorance. No pretending I didn't know exactly how the machinery of murder operated on my ship. I pressed my thumb to the scanner. The files were meticulously organized, directories within directories, each one a deeper circle of hell. I started with the file labeled Historical Necessity. It was a compilation of incidents like the Odyssey. 17 ships over 40 years that had suffered catastrophic consciousness intrusions during FTL transit. The Manhattan with 200 dead. The Sao Paulo lost with all hands, 550 souls. The Birmingham, which had dropped out of FTL with half its crew brain dead and the other half insane, attacking each other with tools and bare hands. Each incident had been classified, buried, explained away as equipment failure or space madness or any of a dozen other lies. But the pattern was clear. Ships that didn't pay the price didn't survive. The next file was labeled Selection Criteria. I opened it and found myself looking at an algorithm, an actual mathematical formula for determining who should die. Variables included productivity ratings, psychological profiles, social connections, specialized skills, potential for advancement, likelihood of compliance issues. Each crew member had a score, updated daily based on performance reviews, medical reports, personal interactions. The lower the score, the higher the selection probability. Miller's file was attached as an example. His productivity was high, but his compliance probability was dropping. The planned grievance had dropped it further. His lack of close family connections, just the sister on Mars 7, meant his social disruption factor was minimal. The algorithm had marked him as optimal for selection 2 weeks before his death. They'd known they were going to kill him for 2 weeks while he went about his duties, played cards with Jones, planned for a future he'd never see. I found my own file. My scores were all in the green except for one metric that had appeared just today. Ideological alignment, pending re-evaluation. The next directory was labelled Implementation Protocols. And this was where the true horror lived. Detailed instructions for the CMO on sedation procedures, on the neural interface process, on maintaining the conscious state required for the entities to accept payment. There were optimal timing windows, drug cocktails to ensure compliance without full unconsciousness, even suggested scripts for getting the selected crew member to the medical bay without suspicion. All lies designed to deliver the lamb to slaughter, but it was the last file that stopped my breath. The nature of the exchange. According to the classified xenobiology reports, the entities weren't just feeding on consciousness, they were collecting it. Each mind they consumed became part of them, absorbed into whatever passed for their existence. The victims didn't just die, they were incorporated into something alien, aware but helpless for however long these things persisted. Miller wasn't just dead. Some part of him was still out there, screaming in dimensions we couldn't perceive. I closed the files and stood up. 72 hours to figure out how to stop a system that had been operating for 40 years, that had the full backing of Fleet Command, that was considered essential for humanity's survival. My door chimed. I hid the datapad before answering. Dr. Fuller stood in the corridor and he looked worse than before. His medical coat was rumpled. There were new stains on the sleeve and his hands shook with more than alcohol withdrawal. "Commander, may I?" I let him in, engaged the privacy screen again. He collapsed into my desk chair without asking, pulled out his flask, found it empty and laughed bitterly. "I thought I could do it," he said. "Thought I could make it to the next jump, perform one more selection, add one more ghost to my collection. But Cole just sent me the candidate list for review." "Already?" "We have 72 hours. He likes to be prepared. Gives me time to run the medical scenarios, make sure our selection won't cause any unexpected complications." Fuller pulled out his personal pad, showed me a list of 5 names. "These are the current optimal candidates according to the algorithm." I recognized 3 of the names. Petty Officer Martinez from Engineering. She'd been complaining about safety violations. Ensign Kumar from Navigation. He'd questioned some of our course corrections. And Lieutenant Morris from security, Harding's own department. Why Morris? He's been asking questions about the medical bay's power consumption. Notice the correlation you found. Harding reported him as a potential security risk. Fuller laughed again. That broken sound. Even security isn't safe from selection. No one is. Well, almost no one. Cole's protected. So is Harding, as long as she remains useful. The algorithm has hard blocks on certain personnel. The rest of us. He gestured helplessly. I've been optimal for selection 3 times. Each time, Cole intervened, said I was too valuable. But that protection only lasts as long as I keep killing for them. Then help me stop it. Fuller looked at me with those haunted eyes. Stop it? You can't stop it, Commander. It's not just this ship. Every long-range vessel in the fleet operates the same way. The entire colonial infrastructure depends on it. You might as well try to stop gravity. There has to be a way. If we could find an alternative to the payment system. There is no alternative. Don't you think they've tried? The best minds in the fleet have spent 40 years looking for another way. Shield modifications, AI negotiations, automated consciousness simulators, nothing works. The entities want living, human consciousness. They can tell the difference. Then we expose it. Tell the crew, tell the colonies, and cause a panic that destroys civilization? Even if you could get a message out, which you can't, not from here, do you think the fleet would let that information spread? They have contingencies, Commander. Ships that try to break the silence suffer catastrophic failures. Entire crews lost to equipment malfunctions. He was right. I knew he was right. But I couldn't accept it. There had to be something, some leverage, some way to... There is one thing, Fuller said quietly. One piece of information that might help you, though God knows what you'll do with it. What? The entities communicate. During the payment process, there's a brief window where the neural interface creates a two-way connection. The CMO is supposed to monitor it, make sure the transfer is clean. But sometimes you hear things, feel things, impressions from the other side. What kind of impressions? They're not monsters. Not exactly. They're trapped. Bound to that space between dimensions, unable to leave, unable to die. They feed because they have to, because consciousness is the only thing that sustains them in that void. But they don't enjoy it. If anything, they seem apologetic. Apologetic? They devour human consciousness and they're sorry about it. I know how it sounds, but during my last implementation, when I was connecting Lieutenant Patterson to the interface, I felt something from them. Regret. Profound, ancient regret. And something else. A sense that this wasn't supposed to be this way. That something had gone wrong a very long time ago. Are you saying they were imprisoned there? I'm saying that maybe the payment system isn't just feeding them. Maybe it's part of something larger. Something the fleet doesn't fully understand or doesn't want us to understand. My terminal chimed. Priority message from Captain Cole. All senior staff to report to Conference Room Alpha in 30 minutes. Jump prep briefing. Fuller stood, swaying slightly. That's my cue to go prepare my medical lies. Commander, Ben, whatever you decide to do, be careful. Cole likes you, but he liked Harrison too. Didn't stop him from feeding him to the void. After he left, I looked at the datapad again, then at my service weapon. For a moment, I considered the simplest solution. Put the barrel in my mouth and remove myself from the equation entirely. But that was my father's way. The retreat into inaction. The surrender disguised as principle. No. If I was going to die, it would be fighting this system, not surrendering to it. And if these entities really were trapped, if they really were as much victims as we were, maybe the solution wasn't to stop the payments. Maybe it was to find out who had imprisoned these things in the first place, and why. 28 minutes until the briefing. Time to put on my mask and play the good soldier one more time while I figured out how to fight a war that had been lost before I was even born. Conference Room Alpha was on Deck 2, just down the corridor from the bridge. I'd sat in this room hundreds of times for routine briefings, but now every detail felt sinister. The polished table where we planned murder. The wall screen where we'd review trajectories that required human sacrifice. The comfortable chairs where killers sat and discussed logistics. I arrived exactly on time, not early enough to seem eager, not late enough to seem resistant. Cole was already there, studying his tablet with the same expression he used for fuel reports. Harding from security sat to his right, his hand resting casually near his sidearm. Fuller was in his usual seat, staring at nothing, the tremor in his hands visible even from across the room. "Commander," Cole acknowledged without looking up, "take your seat." I sat in my designated place, the XO's position at Cole's left hand. Gibbs entered last, grease still under his fingernails from whatever maintenance he'd been performing. He glanced at me just for a second and I caught something in his expression. He knew why we were really here. "Let's begin," Cole said, activating the wall screen. A star chart appeared, showing our current position and the next jump coordinate. "We'll be transitioning to the Kepler 442 system in 71 hours. Standard exploration protocol, with particular interest in the third planet's atmospheric composition." He spoke as if this was routine, and for him it was. Just another jump, another system, another life to be fed to the void. "Engineering status?" Cole asked. "FTL drive is operating at 97% efficiency," Gibbs reported. "We've got a minor fluctuation in the field generators, but nothing that should affect the jump." "Medical?" Fuller straightened slightly, trying to appear professional. "All crew members have completed their mandatory pre-jump physicals. No anomalies to report." "Security?" "Ship's secure," Harding said crisply, "though we do have some personnel concerns that need addressing." Here it came. The selection discussion. The careful, bureaucratic process of choosing who would die. Cole pulled up a new display, the same 5 names Fuller had shown me. "Dr. Fuller has provided the medical analysis. Commander Harding, your security assessment." "Morris is the primary concern," Harding said without emotion. "He's accessed systems outside his clearance level and has been asking questions about classified energy readings. He's also been spreading anxiety among the junior security staff with theories about anomalies in our jump procedures. Martinez in engineering has filed 3 safety complaints this month, all unfounded, but she's creating a disruptive atmosphere. Kumar has been more subtle, but he's been correlating jump coordinates with crew casualties. He hasn't reached any conclusions yet, but he's moving in a dangerous direction." "Master Chief?" Cole turned to Gibbs. "Your opinion on Martinez?" Gibbs was quiet for a moment, and I could see him weighing his words. "She's a good engineer, competent. Her safety concerns aren't entirely unfounded. We have been pushing the maintenance schedules. But is she essential?" That was the question, wasn't it? Not whether someone was good at their job, not whether they had valid concerns, but whether they were essential. Whether their death would impact operations more than their life was causing problems. "No one's essential," Gibbs said finally. "We can cover her duties." Cole nodded and turned to me. "Commander Carter, you've reviewed the files." This was my test. My chance to prove I could be part of this. I thought about the algorithm, the mathematics that reduced human beings to variables. I thought about Miller, dead because he'd wanted safer working conditions. I thought about my predecessor, Harrison, who'd refused to play this game. "I have," I said carefully. "The selection seems optimal." The word tasted like poison, but Cole smiled slightly. Approval. I'd passed the first test. "However," I continued, and his smile faded, "I'm curious about the methodology. How do we ensure the selection doesn't create more disruption than it prevents? Morris, for example, if he disappears right after raising concerns, won't that validate his theories in the minds of others?" "A fair point," Cole said. And for a moment, he looked pleased that I was engaging with the process intellectually. That's why we have implementation windows. Morris won't be selected immediately. We'll wait until his concerns have been addressed, redirected. Perhaps a minor disciplinary action that explains a psychological evaluation, which then reveals stress-related paranoia. His subsequent SDS death becomes tragic, but explainable. They'd thought of everything. Layers of lies to cover the core lie. Murder disguised as medicine, wrapped in bureaucracy, justified by mathematics. Dr. Fuller, Cole continued. Your medical perspective on timing. Fuller looked up from whatever internal hell he'd been contemplating. The neural preparation takes 48 hours. Certain compounds need to be introduced gradually to ensure optimal interface conditions. I'll need to begin the process soon if we're maintaining the jump schedule. Then we need a decision today. Cole looked around the table. I propose Morris as primary selection, with Martinez as backup if complications arise. Objections? Silence. Gibbs stared at his hands. Harding nodded approval. Fuller said nothing. Commander Carter? Cole was watching me carefully. This is your first participation in the selection process. Your input is valued. My first murder, he meant. My initiation into their brotherhood of necessary evil. I need to understand something, I said, choosing my words carefully. The entities, the things we're feeding, has anyone tried to communicate with them beyond the payment process? The room went very still. Harding's hand moved closer to his weapon. Fuller looked up sharply. Even Gibbs seemed surprised. Cole's expression was unreadable. That's a dangerous line of inquiry, Commander. I'm not suggesting we attempt it, I said quickly. I'm asking if it's been tried, if we understand what we're dealing with beyond the basic transaction. The nature of the entities is classified beyond even this level, Cole said slowly. What we know is that they exist. They're hostile without payment, and they accept our current arrangement. That's all we need to know. But Fuller mentioned... I caught myself, but too late. Fuller mentioned what? Cole's voice had gone very quiet. Fuller had gone pale. I'd just potentially signed his death warrant by revealing our conversation. That during the interface process there are sometimes impressions, feedback from the other side. I met Cole's eyes directly. If we're going to do this, I need to understand what we're doing it with. These things we're feeding, are they intelligent? Are they malevolent? They're necessary. Cole cut me off. That's all that matters. They exist in the space we need to traverse, and they demand payment for passage. Whether they're intelligent or malevolent is irrelevant. Is it? If they're intelligent, truly intelligent, then couldn't there be room for negotiation? Some other arrangement. Enough. Cole's command voice, the one that had stopped mutinies and saved ships. 40 years of the best minds in the fleet have explored every option. This is the only way. Of course, Captain, I said, backing down. I apologize. I'm just trying to understand. Understanding comes with time, Cole said, his tone softening slightly. For now, we need a decision. Morris? I nodded. Morris seems the logical choice. And just like that, I'd condemned a man to death. Not because I believed in this system, but because I needed them to think I did. Because I needed time to understand what Cole was hiding about these entities. Good, Cole said. Dr. Fuller, begin preparation protocols. Commander Harding, ensure Morris's duties are covered for his upcoming medical evaluation. Master Chief, I'll need those field generator fluctuations resolved before jump. The meeting dissolved into logistics. How to murder efficiently, how to lie effectively, how to keep the machine running on blood and consciousness. As we filed out, Cole caught my arm. Stay a moment, Commander. The others left, Fuller avoiding my eyes, Gibbs giving me another of those meaningful looks. When we were alone, Cole moved to the viewport, gesturing for me to join him. You're asking the right questions, he said quietly. The ones Harrison asked. The ones every thinking person asks when they learn the truth. And the answers are worse than the questions. He turned to me. Yes, the entities are intelligent. Yes, they were imprisoned in that dimensional space, and yes, there might have been other arrangements possible 40 years ago. Then why? Because the imprisonment wasn't an accident. It was a punishment, a sentence imposed by something even worse than they are. He looked back at the stars. The entities we feed aren't the monsters in this story, Ben. They're the prisoners, and we're the guards, whether we know it or not. Guards for who? For whatever imprisoned them there in the first place. Something that left clear instructions. Feed them or face the consequences. Not just the loss of a ship, but something far worse. You're saying something else, something more powerful set this system up. I'm saying that 40 years ago, the Odyssey didn't just encounter random entities. It triggered an ancient containment system, and that system gave us two choices: become wardens or become victims. That's insane. Is it? We found the FTL technology in an alien probe. We didn't invent it, we copied it. Did you never wonder why? Why would advanced aliens seed our system with technology that requires human sacrifice to operate? The implications hit me like decompression. It was a trap, or a test, or a punishment, or all three. Cole turned back to me. The fleet knows. The highest levels anyway. They've been searching for answers, for the original builders, for some way to break the cycle. But until they find it, we maintain the system. We feed the prisoners. We keep humanity moving forward. Because the alternative... What's the alternative? I don't know, and I never want to find out. He put his hand on my shoulder, that paternal gesture that now felt like a chain. This is the real burden of command, Ben. Not just choosing who dies, but knowing why they have to die. Knowing that we're all prisoners in someone else's cage. He left me standing at the viewport, staring at stars that suddenly seemed less like destinations and more like bars on a cell that spanned the galaxy. I stood at that viewport for 20 minutes, watching stars that had become prison lights, trying to process what Cole had told me. We weren't explorers. We were wardens in a cosmic jail, feeding the inmates to keep something worse at bay. The entire human expansion into space was built on a lie, wrapped in a horror, wrapped in an even greater horror. But Morris was still going to die in 48 hours. I made my way to engineering, needing to think somewhere that wasn't soaked in command authority. Gibbs was at his station, running diagnostics on the field generators. He looked up when I entered, then gestured to his team. "Take 5, people! Coffee break!" When we were alone, he pulled out his flask and took a drink. "You've got that look again." Fuller's already started the preparation protocols. Slow-acting neural primers in Morris's food, his water. In 36 hours, he'll start feeling tired. In 48, he'll report for his medical evaluation and never wake up. And in 70 hours, we'll jump to the next system and pretend it was just bad luck. Gibbs took his flask back. "It's a terrible system, but it works." "What if it didn't have to?" Gibbs looked at me sharply. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Whatever you're thinking. I've seen that expression before. Harrison had it right before he tried to sabotage the drive. Thought if he could prevent jumps, he could prevent deaths. All he did was become one of them. This is different. Is it? I pulled out my personal pad, showed him something I'd been working on since leaving the conference room. The entities communicate during the transfer. Fuller confirmed it. There's a two-way connection when consciousness is being transferred. What if instead of just feeding them, we tried to actually talk to them? You want to negotiate with interdimensional parasites. Cole said they're prisoners. That means they had a life before this, maybe even a civilization. If they're intelligent enough to be punished, they're intelligent enough to reason with. Even if that's true, the fleet would never allow it. The risk. The fleet doesn't have to know, not until it's done. I showed him the modifications I'd sketched out. We can alter the neural interface in the medical bay. Instead of a one-way transfer, we create a true communication channel. Let me connect with them during the next jump. That's suicide. Your consciousness would be exposed, not if we modulate the connection. Small bandwidth, controlled exposure. Enough to talk, not enough to be consumed. Gibbs stared at the designs. This is insane. The whole system is insane. We're murdering people to feed alien prisoners because something even worse set it up that way. How is trying to find another solution any crazier than accepting that? Because trying gets you killed. I'm dead anyway. I met his eyes. Cole knows I won't be able to go through with it. He's watching me, waiting for me to break. The moment I try to save Morris openly, I become the next selection. This is my only chance to do something meaningful before that happens. Gibbs was quiet for a long moment. Then, you'd need help. The medical bay modifications. Someone to monitor the connection. Someone to pull you out if it goes wrong. Fuller, he's broken enough to try anything that might end this. And if Cole finds out, then we're both dead. But at least we tried. Gibbs handed me his flask again. My pension. I know. I'm not asking you to risk it, just don't stop us. Stop you? Hell, Commander, I'll help you. My pension's not worth much if I drink myself to death from guilt before I can collect it. He pulled up his own pad, began making notes on my modifications. We'll need to work fast. Fuller starts the final preparation on Morris in 36 hours. That's our window. You'll really help. Miller was one of mine. They've taken 12 of my people over the years I've been on this ship. Good engineers, good people, selected because they wouldn't shut up and follow orders. He looked at me. Maybe it's time someone else did more than just watch it happen. We spent the next 6 hours planning. How to modify the interface without triggering security alerts. How to create a communication protocol for beings that existed in dimensions we couldn't fully perceive. How to time it with the jump so Cole wouldn't notice until it was too late. Fuller was harder to convince. I found him in his quarters, drunk but not unconscious, staring at a list of names. 27 names. These are mine, he said when I entered. My kills. I remember every one. Davis was 23, fresh from the academy. Sung had 3 kids. Patterson was 2 months from retirement. What if you could stop adding names to that list? I can't. Cole won't let me die. I'm too useful, too complicit. I know too much to be allowed the mercy of selection. I mean, really stop it. End the payment system entirely. I explained my plan. His expression went from skeptical to terrified to something I hadn't expected. Hope. It could work, he said slowly. The neural interface already creates a connection. We just need to stabilize it, add feedback loops, create linguistic conversion algorithms. Can you do it? I designed half these systems. I can modify them. He stood, swaying slightly, but steadier than I'd seen him in days. When? Tomorrow night. During the shift change when most of the crew is in transition, Gibbs will handle any engineering alerts. I'll be the test subject. No. If anyone should risk consciousness exposure, it's me. I'm the one with blood on my hands. You're also the only one who can operate the interface properly. And if something goes wrong, you're the only one who can explain to Cole why his XO is brain dead. Fuller laughed bitterly. He'll kill us both. Probably. But wouldn't you rather die trying to fix this than live as their executioner? He looked at his list of names again. Yes. God help me. Yes. The next 30 hours passed in careful preparation. I performed my XO duties normally, attended meetings, filed reports, gave no sign that anything was wrong. But every spare moment was spent reviewing xenobiology files, communication theory, anything that might help me talk to beings that existed outside our dimensional framework. Cole watched me the entire time. Not obviously, but I felt his attention like pressure against my skull. He knew something was coming. The question was whether he'd act before we were ready. Finally, the moment arrived. 200 hours, the quietest time on the ship. Most of the crew asleep, skeleton staff on duty. Gibbs had arranged a minor maintenance alert in engineering that would draw attention away from medical. I made my way to the medical bay, finding Fuller and Gibbs already there. They'd transformed the neural diagnostics chamber into something that looked like a technological nightmare. Cables running everywhere, additional displays, modified interface chairs. "Last chance to back out," Fuller said. "Morris is scheduled for evaluation in 10 hours. If we don't do this now, he dies for the crime of noticing the truth." "Then let's do it." I sat in the interface chair, let Fuller attach the neural connectors. The sensation was like ice water flowing directly into my brain. "I'm initializing the connection," Fuller said. "Remember, don't try to push through. Let them come to you. If you feel your consciousness being pulled, pull me out. Ben." Gibbs put his hand on my shoulder. "If this doesn't work, then at least we tried something besides murder." Fuller activated the interface and the world disappeared. I existed in a space that wasn't space, a void that pressed against my consciousness from all directions. And then they were there, not seen but felt, presences that were ancient and desperate and so utterly alien that my mind couldn't process them properly. But underneath the alienness was something recognizable: suffering. "Who are you?" The thought wasn't mine, but it appeared in my consciousness as if it was. The entities had found me. "I'm human. From the ship. We've been feeding you. We know. We taste each one, each mind that comes to us. We consume because we must, but we taste their fear, their confusion, their pain. You don't want this. Want. We are beyond want. We exist in hunger. We were made to hunger. It is our punishment." "Punishment for what?" Images flooded my mind. A civilization that had transcended physical form, beings of pure consciousness that had thought themselves gods. They had tried to break through to a higher dimension, to escape the limitations of even energy-based existence. They had succeeded, and found something waiting for them. Something terrible that had judged them for their arrogance, their consumption of lesser beings in their ascent. The punishment was poetic, to exist forever in a space between spaces, sustained only by consuming the very thing they had once transcended: individual consciousness. Can you be freed? Freedom is not possible. The bars of our cage are woven into the fabric of dimensional space itself. But we do not need to feed as often as we do. One consciousness can sustain us for much longer than your kind believes. We consume quickly because we are compelled to when offered. But if the offerings were less frequent? How much less frequent? 1 per vessel per year, perhaps less. We cannot refuse when consciousness is offered directly, but we do not require monthly feeding. 1 per year. We'd been killing 12 times more people than necessary. Why didn't you tell us? How? We can only communicate during transfer, and those we consume cannot carry messages back. You are the first to speak with us without being consumed. If we reduce the offerings, would you accept that? We have no choice in accepting. We take what is given. But yes, we would survive on less. We have tried to communicate this through the fragments, the impressions your medical officers sense, but the fear of us is too great. There's something else. The thing that imprisoned you, is it still watching? Silence. Then a sensation like cosmic terror. It watches everything. Every jump, every feeding, every expansion of your kind into space. You are part of the punishment. Don't you understand? Your growth, your spread across the galaxy, ensures we can never escape. Each new vessel is another chain, another feeding tube. It watches and it approves. What does it want? For us to suffer, for you to suffer, for all consciousness to understand that there are boundaries that should not be crossed, dimensions that should not be breached. Your kind found our cage and made yourselves the keepers. Now you are as trapped as we are. There must be a way to... Pain exploded through my consciousness. Not from the entities, from behind, from real space. I was being pulled back, yanked out of the connection with brutal force. I opened my eyes, found myself still in the chair but with Cole standing over me, furious. Harding had his weapon drawn, pointed at Fuller. 2 security officers held Gibbs. "Did you think I wouldn't know?" Cole said quietly. "Did you think I wouldn't monitor every system on my ship when my XO started asking dangerous questions?" "Captain," I started, but he backhanded me across the face. "You've risked everything. The ship, the crew, humanity's future. For what? To ease your conscience. They don't need monthly feedings." I spat blood. 1 per year, maybe less. We've been killing 12 times the necessary number. Cole froze. "What?" "I talked to them. They're prisoners, just like you said. But they don't need as much as we've been giving them. The fleet either doesn't know or has been lying about the requirements." "You're lying. Check the connection logs. Fuller can show you the communication protocols. We've been murdering people unnecessarily for 40 years. Cole turned to Fuller, who nodded shakily. "It's true, the communication bandwidth was stable. The entity's information was clear." For the first time since I'd known him, Cole looked genuinely shaken. He grabbed the interface logs, scanned through them, his face growing paler with each line. "My God," he whispered. "All those people. All those unnecessary selections." "We can stop it," I said. "Not entirely, but we can reduce it. 1 person per year instead of 12. It's still horrible, but it's not 12 times horrible." Cole lowered himself into a chair, suddenly looking every one of his 60 years. 40 years. Thousands of people across the fleet. "Captain," Harding said, his weapon still trained on Fuller. "Orders. Stand down." "Sir?" "Stand down, Commander. All of you." He looked at me. "You've broken protocol, violated security, risked dimensional breach. By rights, I should have you all executed. But you've also discovered something that changes everything." He stood, moved to the interface. "Show me how to communicate with them. I need to verify this myself." For the next hour, Fuller walked Cole through the modified interface. The captain made the connection, shorter than mine, but enough to confirm what I'd learned. When he emerged, his face was grim but determined. "We're going to have a problem with Fleet Command," he said. "They've been lying. Or they've been lied to. The original Odyssey reports might have been falsified, the requirements exaggerated. Someone somewhere has been inflating the necessary casualties." He turned to Harding. "Release Morris from the selection list. Cancel all preparation protocols." "Sir, the jump..." "We'll make the jump with our last payment from Miller. According to what Ben discovered, that should sustain them for months." He looked at me. "You realize what you've done? If Fleet Command has been deliberately inflating the numbers, if someone has been using the payment system to eliminate 12 times the necessary people, then we've uncovered the biggest conspiracy in human history, or triggered the biggest crisis." He moved to his console, began typing. "I'm logging everything. Your modification, the communication, the true requirements. I'm also declaring a moratorium on selections until we can verify this with other vessels. They'll court-martial you. Probably. But I've sent 27 people to their deaths on this ship alone, if 26 of them were unnecessary." He stopped typing, his hands shaking slightly. "I need to know who knew. Who decided that 12 lives were worth trading for 1? Who's been using the payment system as cover for systematic murder? What do we do now?" Cole looked at me, and I saw him not as my captain or mentor, but as a man carrying an unbearable weight. "Now? We continue to the next system, we make our report, and we prepare for war. Because whoever's been lying about this, whoever's been murdering 11 extra people per ship per year, isn't going to let us expose them without a fight." He turned to address everyone in the room. "What happened here stays here until I say otherwise. We don't know who we can trust, on this ship or in the fleet. But I promise you this. We will find out who's responsible, and they will pay for every unnecessary death." The medical bay was quiet. Morris would live. The selection was cancelled. We'd discovered the truth, or at least part of it. But as I looked at the interface that had let me speak to our cosmic prisoners, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd only scratched the surface. The entities had said something was watching, something that had imprisoned them and made us their keepers. If the fleet had been lying about the payment requirements, what else were they lying about? And what would happen when that watching presence realized we were changing the rules of its punishment? Gibbs broke the silence. So what now, Commander? We've saved Morris, maybe saved hundreds of others if this spreads. Feel like a hero? No, I said honestly. I feel like we've just opened a door we can't close, and I'm terrified of what's going to come through it. Cole put his hand on my shoulder, that paternal gesture that now carried different weight. That's the burden of truth, Ben. It's heavy, it's dangerous, and it changes everything it touches. But carrying it is what makes us human. Even if it destroys us. Especially then. The stars continued their slow wheel outside the viewport, indifferent to our revelations. Somewhere among them, other ships were making jumps, making payments, murdering people who didn't need to die. And somewhere beyond dimensional space, ancient prisoners fed on consciousness while their watchers observed, waiting to see if we'd learned our lesson or needed another one. I'd stopped one murder, possibly prevented hundreds more. But the system itself remained, the cage we'd built ourselves into, the bargain we'd made with cosmic horror, the lies upon lies that kept humanity reaching for stars that might be nothing more than lights on our prison walls. Ben, Cole said quietly, you did the right thing. Remember that, whatever comes next. I wanted to believe him. But as I left the medical bay, passing the quarters of 450 people who had no idea they'd been sailing on a ship powered by murder, I wondered if the right thing and the necessary thing would ever be the same. Either way, there was no going back. I'd chosen to stop being my father, to stop accepting the unacceptable. I'd chosen to fight a battle that couldn't be won, only survived.